how everything changes after you save $10,000. You're lying awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, and your mind is racing through every possible financial disaster that could strike tomorrow. Your car could break down and leave you stranded. Your laptop might die right when you need it most for work. You could lose your job with no warning. Maybe your pet needs emergency surgery that costs thousands. Every unexpected expense feels like it could completely derail your life. Here's the painful truth. Millions of Americans live in this constant state of financial anxiety, mentally calculating whether they can afford basic necessities and treating every purchase like a complex mathematical equation involving their bank balance and upcoming bills. But what if I told you there's a specific dollar amount that could eliminate almost all of these midnight anxiety sessions? Not $1 million or even $100,000, just $10,000. And here's what will shock you. The power isn't in spending that money, it's in knowing it's there. If you're ready to understand the complete psychological transformation that happens when you save your first $10,000, and why it changes everything from your sleep quality to your career confidence, comment financial freedom below. Let me show you the 6 major shifts that happen. Number 1. From survival mode to strategic thinking. When you have zero savings, every single decision in your life feels like it could lead to financial disaster. Should you take that new job that pays more but requires relocating? What if it doesn't work out and you can't afford to move back? Should you invest in that certification program that could boost your salary? What if you spend the money and still don't get promoted? This constant state of financial fear creates a psychological prison where you avoid any choice that involves even minimal risk. Most people don't realize how profoundly the survival mindset affects their entire life trajectory. You turn down opportunities not because they're bad opportunities, but because you literally cannot afford for anything to go wrong. You stay in jobs you hate because at least they're predictable. You avoid networking events because the registration fee feels too risky. You never negotiate your salary because you're terrified they might rescind the offer entirely. Let me tell you about 2 travelers in ancient times who faced the same dangerous mountain pass during winter. The first traveler carried only enough food and supplies for the planned journey, with nothing extra in case of delays or emergencies. When unexpected storms hit, every decision became life or death. Should he push forward in dangerous conditions or wait for better weather and risk running out of food? Every choice felt desperate because he had no margin for error. The second traveler carried the same basic supplies but also brought extra provisions, enough food, water, and materials to handle unexpected delays or route changes. When the same storms hit, this traveler could make calm, strategic decisions. He could wait for safer conditions, take alternate routes, or even help other travelers in distress because he wasn't operating from a place of desperation. But that's just the surface of how this applies to modern financial life. What I'm about to explain is what separates those who stay trapped in survival mode from those who break free into strategic thinking. When you have $10,000 in savings, you're not suddenly wealthy, but you do have enough margin to think beyond just surviving until the next paycheck. That job opportunity in another city becomes worth considering because you have enough money to handle moving expenses and a few months of living costs if things don't work out immediately. The certification program becomes an investment rather than a gamble because you can afford the course fee without risking your ability to pay rent. The salary negotiation becomes possible because you're not terrified of losing your only source of income. Wait, there's something you need to pay attention to if you don't want to miss the most important psychological shift that happens with financial security. This isn't about becoming reckless or taking stupid risks. It's about having the breathing room to evaluate opportunities based on their actual merits, rather than your fear of financial catastrophe. Here's your immediate action step. Start tracking how financial stress affects your decision-making. Notice how many opportunities you avoid or defer because you can't afford to take any risks. This awareness alone will motivate you to prioritize building that financial cushion. The mindset shift is crucial. Safety nets don't make you reckless, they make you strategic. When you're not constantly worried about survival, you can focus on actually thriving. Number 2. The emergency fund effect. Here's something that will completely change how you think about emergency funds. Most people who successfully save $10,000 never actually spend it on emergencies. This seems counterintuitive because we're told to save emergency funds for unexpected expenses. But the real magic happens not when you spend the money, but from knowing it's available if you need it. This psychological phenomenon is called the emergency fund effect, and it explains why people with savings often seem to have fewer financial emergencies than people without savings. It's not that emergencies stop happening. It's that when you have financial reserves, many situations that would be catastrophic for someone else become mere inconveniences for you. The person with no savings faces an $800 car repair as a genuine crisis that might require borrowing money, using credit cards, or missing work to fix the problem cheaply. Meanwhile, the person with $10,000 saved faces the same $800 repair as an annoying but manageable expense that gets handled quickly and efficiently. Let me share an ancient wisdom story that illustrates this perfectly. There once was a village that experienced frequent flooding during rainy seasons. 2 families lived in identical houses on the same street. The first family spent all their resources on immediate pleasures and beautiful decorations for their home, believing they would deal with flooding problems when they arose. The second family lived more modestly, but consistently set aside resources to build flood barriers and emergency supplies. They didn't hope for floods, but they prepared for the inevitable reality that floods would come. When the next flood season arrived, both families faced the same rising waters. The first family panicked, trying desperately to move belongings and protect their home while fighting the rising water. Every decision was reactive and desperate. The second family calmly activated their prepared flood response, raising barriers, moving to higher ground, and weathering the storm without panic. But that's just the obvious lesson about preparation. What I'm about to explain is what makes the difference between those who understand real financial security and those who just accumulate money. The second family didn't benefit primarily when floods actually occurred. They benefited every single day from the peace of mind that came from knowing they were prepared. This daily peace of mind allowed them to take other positive risks, invest in their community, and focus mental energy on opportunities, rather than constantly worrying about the next potential disaster. Their flood preparation didn't just protect them from floods, it freed them to live more fully during non-flood times. The same principle applies to your $10,000 emergency fund. The real benefit isn't the month you actually need it for a medical bill or job loss. The real benefit is the 120 months you don't need it, but sleep better knowing it's there. This mental bandwidth liberation is enormous. When you're not spending mental energy calculating whether you can handle unexpected expenses, that brain power gets redirected toward actually improving your situation. You notice opportunities to increase income, optimize expenses, or invest in your future because you're not constantly focused on just surviving the present. Here's your reality check. Start with $1,000 to experience this psychological shift in miniature. You'll be amazed at how differently you feel about daily financial decisions when you know you have even a small buffer. The mindset shift is crucial. Financial security buys options and peace of mind, not things. Number 3. From financial calculator to human being. Every single day, you make thousands of tiny financial calculations that you probably don't even consciously notice, but they're silently draining your mental energy and affecting your overall quality of life. Should you buy the name brand cereal or the generic? Can you afford to grab lunch today, or should you pack a sandwich? Is it worth paying for premium gas, or will regular be fine? Should you take an Uber or walk 15 minutes in the rain? Each of these micro decisions requires mental processing power, and by the end of the day, you're exhausted from constantly calculating whether you can afford things. This phenomenon is called decision fatigue, and it's particularly brutal for people living paycheck to paycheck because literally every purchase becomes a complex calculation involving your current bank balance, upcoming bills, and how many days until your next paycheck. Your brain is essentially running a financial spreadsheet in the background of every single interaction with money, from buying coffee to paying for parking. Most people don't realize how much mental bandwidth this consumes until they experience life without it. When you have zero savings, you're not just buying groceries. You're simultaneously calculating whether you can afford the groceries, what you'll have to sacrifice if you buy them, and whether you should wait until payday to shop. This mental juggling act happens dozens of times per day and leaves you mentally exhausted. Let me tell you about someone who perfectly described this transformation. She told me that the first time she walked into a grocery store after hitting $10,000 in savings, she almost cried. Not because she went crazy buying expensive items, but because she realized for the first time in years that she could focus on what she actually wanted to eat instead of what she could afford to eat. This shift sounds small, but imagine how much mental energy you'd free up if you stopped having to make survival-based calculations 50 times per day. Instead of your brain constantly running financial stress calculations, that mental capacity gets redirected toward actually productive thinking, planning for the future, being creative at work, or simply being more present in conversations with family and friends. But that's just the beginning of how this affects your daily life. What I'm about to explain is what separates those who understand true financial freedom from those who just accumulate money. When you have $10,000 saved, suddenly 90% of these daily financial decisions become irrelevant. You're not choosing between generic and name-brand pasta because you're worried about your bank account. You're choosing based on what you actually prefer or what makes sense nutritionally. This doesn't mean you become careless with money or start buying everything expensive. Most people who reach this milestone don't dramatically change their spending habits at all. What changes is that their purchasing decisions become conscious choices rather than desperate calculations. Here's your immediate awareness exercise. For 1 week, track every time you make a financial decision based on fear rather than preference. Notice how often you're choosing the cheaper option, not because it's a better value, but because you're anxious about money. The mindset shift is crucial. True wealth isn't about buying expensive things. It's about freedom from constant financial anxiety that allows you to make decisions based on logic and preference rather than fear and desperation. Number 4, the confidence compound effect. When you're constantly worried about money, that financial stress shows up in every aspect of your life in ways you probably don't even realize. It affects how you carry yourself, how you speak in meetings, how you negotiate, and especially how you perform in job interviews. Desperation has a smell, and employers can detect it from across the conference table, even when you think you're hiding your financial anxiety perfectly. The difference between interviewing when you desperately need the job versus when you have options is so dramatic that they feel like completely different experiences. When you're broke, every interview becomes a high-stakes performance where you're trying to convince someone to rescue you from your financial situation. When you have $10,000 in the bank, interviews become conversations between equals, where you're evaluating whether the opportunity makes sense for your career. This confidence shift creates what psychologists call a compound effect. Small improvements in confidence lead to better outcomes, which create more confidence, which leads to even better outcomes. People with financial security walk into salary negotiations differently. speak up in meetings more freely, and are more willing to advocate for themselves because they're not operating from a place of fear. Let me tell you about two job candidates with nearly identical resumes who interviewed for the same position. Both had similar education, experience, and technical skills. The only real difference was their financial situation. Candidate A was living paycheck to paycheck with mounting credit card debt and desperately needed this job to avoid falling behind on bills. Candidate B had several months of expenses saved and was interviewing because the role represented a good career move, not a financial lifeline. During the interview, both candidates answered the technical questions competently. But when the hiring manager asked about salary expectations, their responses revealed everything. Candidate A, despite being qualified for higher compensation, asked for a salary at the bottom of the range because he was terrified of pricing himself out of consideration. He needed this job and couldn't risk losing it over money. Candidate B, having done market research and knowing she had options, confidently requested a salary 20% higher than Candidate A, explaining how her skills would add value to the organization. She could afford to walk away if they couldn't meet her requirements, and that confidence showed. But that's just the obvious difference in the interview room. What I'm about to explain is what makes the difference between those who accelerate their careers and those who stay stuck regardless of their skills. The financial security doesn't just help in job interviews. It enables career investments that broke people simply cannot make. Candidate B could afford to attend industry conferences, take certification courses, and join professional organizations because she wasn't worried about rent money. These investments in her professional development created networking opportunities and skill improvements that led to even better job offers down the road. Meanwhile, Candidate A not only took the lower salary, but also continued to operate from scarcity, avoiding any professional development that required upfront investment. This scarcity thinking kept him trapped in a cycle where financial stress prevented the very investments that could improve his financial situation. Here's your strategic action step. Use any financial security you build to invest in your earning potential. Even with limited resources, prioritize skills development, networking events, or certifications that could increase your income. The return on investment in yourself typically exceeds any financial investment you could make. The mindset shift is crucial. Confidence from financial security creates positive feedback loops that accelerate both your career and your wealth building. Financial stability gives you the psychological foundation to take the calculated risks that lead to better opportunities. Number 5. Identity transformation. The most profound change that happens when you save your first $10,000 isn't financial, it's psychological. You literally become a different type of person with a completely different relationship to money. Most people approach saving like a temporary diet, cutting expenses dramatically for a few months, saving aggressively, then burning out and returning to old spending habits because they never change their fundamental identity around money. The difference between someone who successfully builds wealth and someone who stays broke isn't willpower or income level. It's identity. People who see themselves as spenders will always find ways to spend money, regardless of how much they earn. People who see themselves as savers will always find ways to save money, even when facing financial challenges. This identity shift is what makes reaching $10,000 so transformative. It's not just proof that you can save money, it's proof that you are someone who saves money. This identity change affects every financial decision you make going forward. When you see yourself as a saver, you start noticing opportunities to reduce expenses that you never saw before. You become more creative about finding additional income sources. You start thinking long-term instead of just focusing on immediate gratification. The beautiful thing about this process is that it gets easier as your saver identity strengthens. Let me tell you about the psychological research behind identity-based habits. Scientists have found that people who successfully change behaviors don't just change their actions, they change how they see themselves. Instead of saying, "I want to save money," successful savers say, "I am someone who saves money." This subtle language shift creates a completely different relationship with financial decisions. When you identify as a saver, spending money on unnecessary things feels uncomfortable because it conflicts with your self-image. You start asking different questions before purchases. Is this something a financially responsible person would buy? Instead of, "Can I afford this right now?" This internal filter becomes automatic and protects you from impulse purchases that derail financial progress. But that's just the beginning of how identity transformation affects your financial life. What I'm about to explain is what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who save for a while, then fall back into old patterns. The identity shift from spender to saver creates what psychologists call identity protective behavior. You make decisions that reinforce your new self-image rather than contradict it. This means you start seeking out information about personal finance, surrounding yourself with other people who prioritize financial responsibility, and making choices that strengthen your saver identity. You might start reading financial books, listening to investing podcasts, or joining online communities focused on wealth building. These activities reinforce your new identity and make it more likely you'll continue saving behavior long-term. Here's your identity development action step. Start using language that reinforces your saver identity. Instead of saying, "I'm trying to save money," say, "I'm someone who prioritizes financial security." Instead of, "I can't afford that," say, "I choose not to spend money on that because it doesn't align with my financial goals." The mindset shift is crucial. The person you become while saving your first $10,000 is infinitely more valuable than the money itself, because that identity enables all future financial success. Number 6, from reactive to proactive financial life. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, your entire financial life becomes a series of reactions to whatever crisis pops up next. Your car breaks down, so you scramble to find repair money. Your insurance premium increases, so you panic about how to cover the difference. A family emergency requires travel, so you stress about affording plane tickets. This reactive approach keeps you trapped in a cycle where you're always putting out financial fires instead of actually building wealth. Having $10,000 saved creates what financial psychologists call breathing room, the space between financial problems and financial panic that allows for strategic thinking rather than desperate reactions. This breathing room is the foundation of every good financial decision because it gives you time to research options, compare prices, and make choices based on logic rather than urgency. Most people don't realize how much better their financial decisions become when they're not making them under pressure. The person with no savings accepts the first repair quote they receive because they need their car fixed immediately and can't afford to shop around. The person with savings can get multiple quotes, research the mechanic's reputation, and even consider whether it makes more sense to repair the current car or use this as motivation to buy something more reliable. Let me illustrate this with a scenario that plays out millions of times across America every year. Two people face identical situations. Their 10-year-old car needs $2,000 in repairs to pass inspection. Person A has no savings and desperately needs the car to get to work. They panic, put the repairs on a credit card, and end up paying $2,400 total after interest while continuing to drive an aging vehicle that will likely need more expensive repairs soon. Person B has $10,000 saved and faces the same repair estimate. Instead of panicking, they take time to research their options. They discover that $2,000 in repairs on a 10-year-old car might not be the best investment. They explore financing options for a newer, more reliable vehicle and realize they can get a 3-year-old certified pre-owned car with a warranty for $15,000. Using their savings as a down payment, they end up with lower monthly payments than person A's credit card debt and a reliable vehicle that won't need major repairs for years. But that's just one example of how breathing room changes decision-making. What I'm about to explain is what separates those who break free from the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle from those who stay trapped regardless of their income. The breathing room created by savings doesn't just help during emergencies. It enables proactive financial optimization that compounds over time. When you're not constantly stressed about money, you start noticing inefficiencies in your financial life that people simply don't have the mental bandwidth to address. You might realize your phone plan is ridiculously expensive and shop around for better rates. You might notice your car insurance renewal and actually compare options instead of just accepting whatever they send you. You might discover that switching banks could eliminate monthly fees and earn better interest rates. These optimizations might only save you $50 to $100 per month individually. But when you're not stressed about money, you're more likely to notice and act on these opportunities. Those small improvements compound over time into serious savings that accelerate your wealth building and create even more breathing room for future optimization. Here's your proactive financial action step. Use any financial stability you build to audit and optimize your recurring expenses. When you're not panicking about money, dedicate time to reviewing subscriptions, insurance policies, and service providers to ensure you're getting good value. The mindset shift is crucial. Breathing room is the foundation of every good financial decision because it allows strategic thinking rather than desperate reactions. Now you understand why $10,000 isn't just a number in your bank account. It's a complete psychological transformation that touches every aspect of your life. From eliminating the survival mode that keeps you trapped in reactive decisions to creating the breathing room that enables strategic thinking. From freeing up mental bandwidth by ending constant financial calculations to building the confidence that accelerates your career opportunities. From transforming your identity from spender to saver to shifting from crisis mode to proactive financial optimization. But here's the reality check that's crucial to understand. $10,000 doesn't make you rich, and it doesn't solve all your financial problems. You're still going to think carefully about major purchases, you're still going to need to work, and you're still going to face financial challenges. What changes is that you face these challenges from a position of stability rather than desperation. The transformation happens gradually as you build toward this milestone. You don't need to save $10,000 all at once. Start with $25 or $50 monthly and focus on developing the identity of someone who saves money. The habits you build and the person you become during this process are more valuable than the money itself. What's your current savings goal? And what's one specific change you'll make this month to move toward it? Comment below and let me know if you're starting from zero or building on existing savings. If this helped you understand the psychology behind financial security, share it with someone who needs to know that building wealth starts with building that first crucial buffer. The person you become while saving your first $10,000 is the foundation for everything that comes after.